I didn't really want to be at that family gathering, but I told myself it would be quick. My cousin had just moved to a small neighborhood outside Stockton, and everyone insisted on visiting the new place. I kept repeating the same line to myself in the car: just show up, stay an hour, and leave. The GPS announced I'd arrived near the house. The street was quiet, the kind of quiet that settles in deep. The houses sat close together with their porch lights off, and a few trees lined the sidewalk, their branches barely moving in the still air. There weren't many cars around, so I pulled into an open spot. That's when I noticed it. A dark sedan parked at the far end of the block. Nothing unusual about it at first glance. No flat tires or broken windows. No, but as I walked past, something hit me. A strong chemical punch in the air. Not oil, not engine heat. It was that sharp, acidic sting of industrial paint remover. The same kind my uncle used in his garage when we scraped old paint off the walls. A smell you don't forget. And definitely not one that should be coming from a parked car in the dark. For a second, my mind tried to connect the dots. Why would someone use that inside a car? What would they need to strip or clean in the dark like this? And why here? On this street? At this hour? None of the answers I came up with made me feel any better. I slowed down without meaning to. Instinct, maybe. I leaned slightly toward the car, not close enough to touch it, but close enough to confirm it wasn't my imagination. The smell was so strong it felt like someone had used the remover right before I got there. Something about it felt wrong, and my gut tightened for a second. But inside the house, my family's voices spilled into the night. Laughter, clinking glasses, people calling my name. I let that pull me inside. Noise felt safer than silence. The house was warm and loud and full of distractions. After a while, I forgot about the car. The food was actually really good, especially the garlic bread my cousin had made. He always cooked well. I grabbed a few pieces, had some soda, and for a moment it felt easy to just blend into the noise. About an hour later, I stepped outside for air. My head was buzzing from too many conversations, and the night felt cooler than I expected. I glanced down the street out of habit, just a quick, idle look, and my stomach dropped. The sedan's driver's side window was now cracked open, just an inch. It had definitely been shut earlier, and the chemical smell was stronger now, drifting through the gap like heat venting out of a machine that wasn't supposed to be running. I moved my hand to my pocket slowly and pulled out my phone, pretending to read something as I scanned the area. That's when I saw him. A man stood on the far side of the sedan, half hidden by the shadow of a tree. He wasn't fixing the car. He wasn't unloading anything. He wasn't even leaning on it casually. He was standing there, completely still, angled slightly toward the sidewalk, almost like he was listening to the neighborhood breathe. I froze. Something about the way he held himself was wrong. And then, without any hesitation, he lifted his head and looked directly at me. My chest tightened. I stepped back toward the porch, slow enough to not draw attention but fast enough for my pulse to spike. His eyes followed the movement, tracking me. Only when I was at the top step did he finally move. He walked around the front of the sedan with a steady, deliberate pace. He opened the driver's door, paused halfway inside, and kept staring at me. Then he slid in, closed the door, and started the engine. He didn't speed off. He rolled forward slowly, almost silently, the way someone leaves a place they feel comfortable in. I stood on the porch until the taillights vanished around the bend. Inside, I tried to act normal. I helped clean up empty plates, laughed at something my uncle said, and reminded myself not to make a big deal out of it. Still, every few minutes I caught myself scanning the windows, looking for him. Eventually, I said goodbye and headed to my car. It was close to midnight. The street was quiet again. I pulled out of the neighborhood and told myself I was being dramatic, that the man was just strange, that the smell was just from some faulty engine. The usual excuses people use to calm themselves down. But 2 streets away, I approached a stop sign, and as my headlights swept across the corner, my stomach flipped. The same sedan, parked on the side of the road, engine running, driver waiting. He didn't move until I did. The moment my car rolled forward, his headlights flashed on. He pulled out behind me, not tailgating, just close, too close. I made a right turn. He made the same turn. I switched lanes casually. He switched too. My palm started to sweat. The wheel felt slippery under my hands. I tried turning onto a busier street, hoping he'd stay straight. He didn't. He followed. At the next red light, instead of stopping behind me, he eased up beside me, window down again, just an inch. The same chemical smell leaked into the air between us. I didn't dare look directly at him, but I could see the silhouette. Straight posture, head angled slightly toward my car, unmoving. My phone buzzed in the cup holder, nearly making me jump. I glanced down. A message from my cousin. "Hey, did you forget something? I thought I saw someone walk up to the porch after you left." My mouth went dry. Before I could even process the message, the sedan revved once, sharp enough to jolt my nerves, and then shot through the red light like the signal didn't apply to him. He turned down a dark side street and vanished. I stayed frozen in place until the light turned green. Driving home, the silence inside my car felt tight and wrong. My heartbeat was louder than the road noise. I checked my mirrors constantly, expecting headlights to reappear, expecting to see that exact silhouette behind me. They never did. But the way he moved, the way he waited, the way he followed, it didn't feel random. It felt like he had already chosen me once, and changed his mind at the last moment. And sometimes, when I pull into my driveway at night, I still scan the end of the street, half expecting to see that sedan idling in the dark, window cracked just an inch, watching. I showed up later than I should have. My name is Daniel, I'm 23, and I work part-time at a hardware store while studying for a certification I keep postponing. I don't go out much, and I almost never say yes to family invitations, but this one wasn't optional. It was my aunt's birthday, and she'd specifically asked to see me there. Turning that down would have made things worse. The house wasn't crowded when I arrived, just a soft murmur of voices drifting out through the slightly open front door. A few cars were parked along the driveway, their headlights still ticking as they cooled. Inside, the atmosphere felt calmer than I expected. A handful of relatives talking in the living room, my uncle grilling outside, and a small table set up with homemade appetizers and sparkling water. No loud music, no chaos. Just a relaxed family evening I could survive for an hour. I took off my shoes by the door, said a quick hello to whoever noticed me, and headed toward the kitchen to look less awkward. My aunt hugged me like she hadn't seen me in years and pushed a plate of empanadas into my hands. For a moment, everything felt predictable and normal. Then, as I turned to grab a drink from the counter, I saw him. A man I didn't recognize standing near the sliding glass door that led to the backyard. He wasn't talking, wasn't eating, wasn't even pretending to mingle. Just standing there with his hands in his pockets, eyes fixed on something outside. No one else seemed to notice him. No one greeted him. No one introduced him. He didn't look like he belonged. And yet, he was inside the house. At first, I assumed he was one of my uncle's co-workers or maybe a neighbor dropping by. My family has a habit of letting people wander in and out during gatherings, and it never strikes anyone as odd. But something about him felt different. He wasn't standing like someone waiting for a conversation to start. He was standing like someone waiting for something to happen. I tried not to stare. I grabbed a bottle of soda from the counter, nodded at a cousin's friend I barely knew, and pretended to check my phone while keeping him in my peripheral vision. He didn't move, not an inch. Just kept looking into the dark backyard as if he was counting shadows. My aunt waved me over to help her bring out a tray of snacks, and I forced myself to act normal. When I turned back toward the sliding door a few seconds later, he was gone. No footsteps, no door sliding open, no greeting, no goodbye, just gone. I stepped closer to the door and peered outside. The backyard wasn't large, a small patch of grass, a cracked cement patio, and a wooden shed leaning slightly to the left. The motion sensor light flicked on when I approached the glass, flooding the yard with pale white light. There was no one out there. Maybe he walked to the front of the house. Maybe someone let him in earlier, and no one bothered to mention it. I tried to shake the feeling off, but something about his absence felt louder than his presence. I eventually made my way to the living room, where my uncle had turned on a game. People were settling onto couches with plates in their laps, laughing at something on the screen. I sat at the edge of an armchair, trying to blend in without drawing attention. But every few minutes, my eyes drifted around the room, checking corners, checking doorways, checking reflections in the TV screen. He wasn't there. Not near the hallway, not by the dining table, not anywhere. About half an hour passed, and I convinced myself I'd imagined the uneasiness. I even started feeling a little more relaxed, enough to eat another empanada and talk to my cousin about his new job. Then my aunt called out from the kitchen, asking if someone could grab an extra roll of paper towels from the garage. My cousin was busy cutting cake, so I offered. I opened the door to the garage, expecting to see the usual clutter, boxes stacked badly, holiday decorations balancing on paint cans, the washer running in the corner. Instead, the first thing I noticed was the air. Cold. Still. Too quiet for a running washer. I flipped the light switch. Nothing. The bulb didn't flicker. It stayed dead. I lifted my phone and turned on the flashlight, casting a beam across the cluttered space. Shapes formed slowly in the light. The outline of the washer, the old bicycles hanging from the wall mounts, the camping gear my uncle probably hadn't touched in years. And then the beam landed on something else. A shadow. A tall, unmoving shadow near the door that led to the side yard. For 1 second, I thought it was just the outline of a coat rack or a misplaced piece of furniture. Then it shifted. Not much. Just enough for my breath to stop in my throat. I stepped back, my heel bumping a plastic bin behind me. The sound echoed through the garage, louder than it should have been. I kept the flashlight pointed forward, but the shadow didn't move again. "Daniel, you find it?" My aunt called from the kitchen. I turned toward her voice, and when I turned the light back to the corner, the shadow was gone. The side door, the one that should have been locked, was now open just an inch. Cold night air drifted in. My chest tightened, and I forced myself to move, grabbing the paper towels without taking my eyes off that door. I shut it quickly, twisted the lock, and stepped back into the kitchen, trying not to look shaken. My aunt didn't notice. She thanked me and went back to slicing cake. I stood there for a moment, heart pounding, trying to convince myself I'd seen a coat or a stack of boxes, not an actual person. But I knew what I saw, and I knew what I felt. Later in the night, guests started leaving, one by one. The mood softened, the noise died down, and people gathered near the front door to say goodbye. I stood near the coat rack, waiting for a moment to slip out unnoticed. That's when I saw him again, standing in the hallway that led to the bedrooms. Same posture, hands in his pockets, face unreadable. No one spoke to him. No one brushed past him. No one even acknowledged he existed. A chill ran down my spine. I stepped closer to my aunt as she hugged someone goodbye. "Who's that guy?" I whispered. She followed my gaze toward the hallway, but by the time she looked, he was gone, like he had never been there. She frowned. "What guy?" "The one by the bedrooms," I said, lowering my voice. "Tall, dark jacket." She shook her head. "Daniel, no one here was wearing a jacket tonight. It's warm out." I didn't know what to say. I just nodded as if it were nothing and followed her to the front door. As I stepped outside, I felt the night wrap around me. Colder than before, darker than seemed normal. I walked to my car quickly, unlocked it, and got inside. For a second, before starting the engine, I looked back at the house. The sliding door to the backyard was slightly ajar again, just like the garage door. A shape stood inside, barely visible. I didn't wait to see if it moved. I started the car and drove away. And the whole drive home I couldn't stop thinking. And the thought that stayed with me long after I left was the simplest one. Why was I the only person who saw him? What was he doing in rooms no one else used, and slipping out of them without a sound? The more I replayed it, the more I realized something unsettling. Maybe he hadn't been a guest at all. Maybe he didn't come for anyone in the house. Maybe he was just there. And for reasons I still don't understand, I was the only one who noticed him. My name is Alex, I'm 26, and I've been in a strange stretch of life where even simple things feel heavier than they should. My sister knows that. She always has. She's the type who notices how you're doing before you say a word, which is probably why she insisted I come to the small gathering at her house that night. Her place sits at the edge of a quiet Northern California neighborhood, where all the houses look like slight variations of the same model. I pulled up just after sunset, parked behind two familiar cars, and walked toward the warm glow coming from her windows. Inside, everything was normal. She hugged me, pushed a plate of food into my hands, and told me, "Please talk to people for once." I grabbed a soda and greeted a few relatives. About 20 minutes in, people were laughing, passing food around, arguing about which movie to put on. The usual family noise. I was pouring myself another cup of soda when the music cut out mid-song. Just gone. Before anyone could blame Bluetooth, the lights flickered once, sharp, quick. Enough for everyone to notice. Someone joked about the power bill, someone laughed it off, someone else blamed the grid. People kept talking. I wasn't scared or anything. It just felt odd, a little offbeat. So I stepped outside to get some air. But apparently half the guests had the same idea. The front porch, driveway, even part of the sidewalk were suddenly crowded. People talking, smoking, laughing like nothing had happened. I wanted some quiet, so I walked along the narrow path on the side of the house. Leaves crackled under my shoes. The voices faded behind me. By the time I reached the backyard, everything was still. I stepped onto the patio, and the first thing I noticed was the dark. The motion sensor light above the sliding door didn't turn on. It usually blinded you immediately, but now it stayed dead no matter how close I got. I waved a hand. Nothing. I leaned closer to the door, trying to check if the switch inside was off. That's when I heard it. A soft, brushing sound sliding along the siding. I turned fast, heart jumping. But the yard was empty. No wind, no animals. Nothing that should have made that sound. I didn't linger. I walked back inside, shutting the door behind me. Back in the kitchen, the noise felt warmer again. The music had come back on, not restarting from where it stopped, but jumping into a completely different song, like the playlist had skipped ahead on its own. A couple of people glanced at the speaker, confused, but someone joked about the Wi-Fi acting up and everyone moved on. I grabbed another soda, trying to settle back into the flow of the night, when my sister called from the hallway. "Alex, can you bring more napkins? They should be in the guest room dresser." "Yeah, sure." I headed down the hallway. The further I got from the main room, the quieter the house became. Too quiet for a gathering. The guest room door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open and stepped inside. Everything looked normal. Bed neatly made, lamp still on from earlier, a faint citrus smell from one of my sister's candles. I went to the dresser, opened the top drawer, and grabbed the pack of napkins. When I closed the drawer and turned to leave, something flickered at the corner of my vision. Fast, like someone stepping back out of sight. I froze, breath catching before I could stop it. I looked toward the closet. The door was cracked open. I hadn't touched it. A shiver rolled across my shoulders. Not fear exactly, but that instinctive tension your body gets before your mind understands why. I stepped closer, feeling my pulse in my neck. Hello? My voice sounded too soft, too careful. I nudged the closet door with the back of my knuckles. It creaked open an inch. Inside, coats, a suitcase, a few folded blankets. Nothing else. Nothing that should have moved. But the feeling didn't fade. It pressed in around me. That sense that someone had been standing there a second earlier, close enough to touch me. I looked around, and nothing. I swallowed, stepped out of the room, and pulled the door shut a little faster than necessary. Back in the kitchen, my sister glanced at me from across the counter. She has that look, the one that reads everything you try to hide. "You good?" she asked, lowering her voice. "Yeah," I said, letting out a quick laugh to pretend everything was normal. My sister didn't push, but she gave me that look, the one she's had since we were kids, like she can read every thought I'm trying to hide. She got pulled back into the living room, and I stood there for a second, making sure everything was still normal. I tried to shake off whatever I felt in the guest room. I really did. I went back to drying dishes, making small comments here and there, trying to slide back into normalcy. For a moment, it worked. People were still talking, still picking at food, still moving around like nothing strange had happened. Then the lights dipped. Just for half a second, but long enough for the whole room to go quiet. Nobody made a big deal out of it, but everyone noticed. You could feel it. After that, people started getting ready to leave. And not in the slow, drawn-out family way. No. Tonight it was quick hugs, quick goodbyes, keys already in hand. Something about the house felt done, like everyone wanted to be somewhere else. When the last person stepped out, my sister locked the door and let out this long exhale she didn't mean to let me hear. We started cleaning up, her washing, me drying. The kind of quiet teamwork we fall into without thinking. It felt grounding, steady. Then my phone buzzed, just one notification. I picked it up, glanced at the screen, and my whole body went cold. It was a photo, from an unknown number. A picture of the backyard, taken from outside, taken from right up against the sliding glass door, close enough that I could see the reflection of our kitchen lights in the glass. And in the bottom corner of the frame, half cut off, a sneaker, a man's sneaker, pointed toward the house. I hadn't taken that picture. I hadn't even been near the backyard. My sister's phone buzzed next. She looked at her screen, and her face changed instantly. "Alex, I got the same photo." We compared them side by side. Same angle, same darkness, same sneaker, same timestamp, 10:52 p.m. Exactly when the lights dipped. Neither of us had touched our phones then. I didn't waste time thinking, "I'm checking the door," I said. She followed close behind me. I flipped on the backyard light. It flickered twice like it didn't want to cooperate, then finally stayed on. The yard looked empty, and then my eyes caught the gate. It was open farther than before, not a crack, not a breeze. Open just wide enough for someone to slip through. I locked the door immediately. "We're calling the police," I said. My sister didn't argue. Her hands were shaking. 2 officers showed up fast. They didn't say much, just went straight to the backyard with their flashlights, scanning everything, moving slower than officers usually do when they're confident nothing's wrong. I watched them through the window. At one point, one of them knelt near the corner of the siding, right around where I'd heard that dragging sound earlier. He leaned in closer, almost too close, then stood up quickly like he didn't want to look at it anymore. Back inside, they tried to act normal, but they weren't pulling it off. "We didn't find any clear footprints," one of them said. The other added, "The ground's uneven, Hard to tell what's what. He wouldn't meet my eyes. My sister pointed at the gate. It doesn't open on its own, ever. It could have been the wind, the first officer said. There is no wind, I told him. He didn't answer that. When we showed them the photos, the room felt smaller. They stared at those images longer than any glitch deserved. They exchanged a look, a small one, but filled with something they weren't saying. Phones glitch, one said. Old pictures get pulled from the cloud. But we've never taken that picture, I said. Silence. Then the second officer cleared his throat. We'll drive around the block. Just keep your doors locked tonight. And that was it. They left. As soon as the door closed behind them, the house seemed to sink into itself. Like whatever had been outside hadn't really gone anywhere. It had just stopped making noise. My sister hugged her arms to her chest. What do you think it was? She asked. I didn't answer right away, because the truth was still settling in. Someone had been at that door, inches from the glass, close enough to take a picture, close enough to breathe against the window, close enough to hear us inside the moment the lights flickered. And the worst part was simple. Whoever it was, they wanted us to know they'd been there.